Hello, and welcome to another Pressing In. Our desire and goal at Pressing In is to take what we're talking about through our online service and have frank, honest conversations with leaders from around Blue Ridge, looking for practical ways to apply to our lives throughout the rest of the week the subjects that we've been talking about and wrestling through. Well, 2 weeks ago, we looked at the book of Philemon and asked the uncomfortable questions: why should the church talk about racism, and how should we go about doing it? Well, today, we want to continue in part 2 of our conversation with Troy and Chaka Burnett as we listen to their personal stories, experiences, and feelings about racism. Specifically, the George Floyd murder. And admitting, I'm not asking you guys to speak on behalf of all Black America. Okay. I'm wanting to know Chaka and Troy. And how did that, because it does seem like it struck a different nerve in many people. So let me ask the question this way. Did it strike a nerve differently in you? And if so, what is different? Why is it, maybe, if it is, why is it different for you in this season? So, whichever one wants to go first.
For me, it's not different.
Okay.
It's something that we understand, or we believe to be an issue that we've been educated about in our own upbringing. Again, going back to the fact that I went to a predominantly white school, the history book didn't look the same, as the history that I was taught. Mm-hmm. My parents were also very good about making sure I read other things. Like I learned about Martin Luther King, and he wasn't just a blurb or a piece or what have you. And I learned about segregation and Jim Crow laws, and that I understood, even in some of the things that I saw, more so for protection of myself and also so for awareness, that I was sensitive to our history. Mm-hmm. But I think the filming of it has forced us to be a conversation once again. Now it's amplified, and now everyone's talking about it. So it's not new for me. It's just now I'm used to having this conversation, with him or with family or with whatever. But to have a conversation like we're having right now, to be honest, feels awkward. Uh-huh. It feels, if I had to, even question, I'm like, is this okay? What do I say? Like that kind of thing. What do I share again? Like I told you in the beginning, am I giving up secrets? So just different in that way, but not new.
Not new. Mm-hmm. Different in the way that it's together more than what you've experienced or seen.
For myself, murder has never been something that was easily acceptable. Like I don't even watch horror films. Yeah. So anytime murder or death happens like that, it hits home. One thing about George Floyd specifically is that couple elements. I looked at the photo of George Floyd. He looks like one of my uncles. Okay. And so I'm looking at this video. I'm like, man, that could have been my Uncle Darnell. That could have been Uncle Michael. That could have been Uncle Onion. My uncle's name's Onion. When stuff like that looks like it's close to home, it hits you differently, even though you're not even in that situation. Like, I give you an example. All right, so let's look at the dynamic of us being Christians, right? When we hear about persecution somewhere else, it hits us because it's like, man, if I would have been there, because I'm a Christian too, they would have did that to me. And so my friend, Pastor A.J. Mosley in Divine Unity Church, he said that there was a story of a lady because in Asia, in some places in Asia, the gospel is not accepted, and there was this one woman who was found out to be pushing the gospel in the underground church. She was discovered, and part of her torture was, deny Christ or we'll torture you. And she was like, I can't do it. So what they did was they tied her legs up, They would pull her up and she would just drop to her head. And they would pull her up, drop her to her head. And she survived that. But in the moment that when that story was being told by her to other people, people felt every single pain. Why? Because they identified with her because of the Christian faith that they shared, and they knew that if they were in that situation, that would be them too. And very similarly with Black culture, amongst African Americans, when we see one another, it's like we're one big whole family. There's a lot of commonalities that we have. There's a connection because of I think it all stems from like our history with one another. Our cultural that we grew up in. There's a connection that we all have. So when I saw George Floyd being murdered, I felt like that was one of my family members. That's how that kind of hit me. And then on top of that, the reason why George Floyd's situation came up and hit me kind of hard was because of the responses I was seeing on social media. So on one side of the spectrum, the thing comes out and the video is basically just reposted by every last one of my friends of color. I'm not even talking, not just African Americans. Yeah. I'm talking about like my Hispanic friends, my friends from across overseas. You know what I'm saying? Like they were just posting it like, can y'all believe this travesty that's going on right now? And I'm not when I state this, please understand, I'm not trying to say that it's wrong or anything like that, but I saw that side, and then on my predominantly white side of my friends and stuff like that, I would see like hanging out at the park today, look at my kid, me and my hubby were having a glass of wine, you know what I'm saying? Like everything seemed like so happy. And there was some of I'm not gonna say that was all of my white friends. And it just showed that there was a dynamic, a difference of dynamic of exposure. And, of course, the things that are going to be posted and I see from one side is going to be things that are important to them and vice versa. And so then you have those who are oblivious, but then you have those who are aware but choose not to have sympathy or empathy at all. And specifically, I wasn't necessarily hurt by my non-Christian friends because they're going to do what they're going to do. You know what I'm saying? And I love y'all. But for the Christian friends who would make posts along the lines of, I don't have any empathy or sympathy for this person or something like that because he had a background and stuff. And I'm like, do you not hear how anti-gospel you are? I can't hold non-believers accountable for that. But I'm like, do you hear how anti-gospel you are being right now? Jesus literally said in the parable when he was questioned, who is our neighbor? He legit came out and said, gave the story of the Good Samaritan. And the Good Samaritan who saw this individual in the middle of the road, hurt, beat up, left for dead, didn't ask any questions of the Good Samaritan at all. Put him on his horse, carried him to the inn, even gave some money for his stay there, and went on about his business. And I literally I felt as though I had a lot of friends who were just like the priest and the Levite in that story, who saw this individual who was hurt and left for dead and was like, I don't know what you did, but I don't have anything to do with it. Yeah. And it exposed, a lot of people to me. But then my heart changed. I was like, instead of criticizing, I need to start praying. Mm-hmm. Because only God can change those individuals. And I pray that some would be willing to have conversations with me. And then after I prayed that I hope people will want to have conversations with me, everyone started hitting me up. And I was like, I don't have any conversations. When I was sharing with you, I was like, I can tell for a lot of my friends that I'm their only Black friend. And first of all, that should be one indication that something's going wrong, and especially if you call yourself a Christian, we should be, heaven is described as going to be very ethnically diverse. And so the fact that I got so many DMs, inboxes, text messages, phone calls, emails, it concerned me that some of my white friends didn't have a diversity of friends. But at the same time, and I appreciate you challenging me, because you were like, Troy, you just need to be that voice. And I didn't want to be the voice anymore, but I realized to the calling that God has given me, sometimes we just have to be the voice. And that's even why we're here today.
Sometimes when you're put in that position, it's challenging because at the same time you're expected to help educate, you're going through it. And so I think
yes,
it's kind of like, how do I separate myself from this moment enough to help someone else understand how I'm feeling, what I'm going through, how this is impacting me, or things that they just might not understand because this is their first exposure. And you become automatically that first go-to for people because they're genuinely seeking to understand, but at the same time, because they're so far removed, that part of understanding that says, I need time, or that part of understanding that says, part of the issue that's happening right now possibly is because you haven't educated yourself, because you haven't taken the time to know it. Like we've talked, we don't mind sharing the story and we'll be happy, but we want people to understand this is our experience. And so one of the things that I said to him is, I don't want to always be providing the cliff notes. I would, I would like for someone to pick up a book. Google makes it easy for you to be able to read and look at some of the things we're talking about if there's a question or even to understand the history. I fault education in the regard that it's been taken out of so much.
Or it's been romanticized.
One of the things in our conversation again that I pointed out, I said, if you ever watch the time period movies, you ever notice they stay near the house when they're showing clips, or they go into a nicer area, because if they were to do a panoramic view of the area, you'd see slaves in the field. You would see, and it would take away from the essence of the story. And I said, so even in that regard, like you said, it's been romanticized. That's, I think, where I stand for me. I don't mind having the conversation. I'm willing to share, but I want this to just be a starting point. I want people to then go out and educate themselves. Come to me with questions of stuff you've read or learned or heard, not just for, so what's happening? You know what I mean? So that's my stance on it.
And then you get a question of like, what book should I read? I'm like, I lived the life. I can't tell you. I can't. There's not a book that captures the stories from my grandfather, my great grandfather that I grew up with. There are other people's stories, but I can't. But those are the things that I've lived through.
As we were talking, you enlightened me with a term that I wasn't familiar. Now, again, I've admitted my own ignorance, so this may not be ignorance for anyone else, but for me, I was ignorant to this whole idea. You asked me if I knew what the term code switching was, and I didn't. And so I had you describe it, or you described it for me. And even as you're telling your stories now with that filter, I'm hearing you guys describe it in your experience and what you do. So can you guys describe code switching? And can you describe both the good and the negative for you two in your experiences with code switching?
I think the Oxford term, if you will, of code switching is actually when you switch between two different languages. Usually it's something like between English and Spanish, or two culturally different languages. In cultural experiences, and in particular what we're talking about, code switching is, again, switching between two different dialects. So there's a way perhaps that you may talk when you're amongst close ones and family and people who are the same that you don't necessarily do when you're around people who are different. And part of that is so that you don't come across as being offensive, so that you don't come across as being threatening, so that you don't come across as being, like too excited or just crazy, if you will. I think one of the things that we didn't touch on is the Eurocentric thought that America has been built on is what we were taught to live in. And so everything from, again, going back to the way that we might wear our hair, do our hair, that is more presentable, that is seen as more Eurocentric, less threatening, less ethnic, all of those things are ways that we're taught growing up to assimilate so that we can have an opportunity for a better job or be accepted or, again, not seem threatening or harsh or hard or rude or what have you. And so code switching is one of those things where we're taught to articulate a certain way that is more acceptable in the workforce, more acceptable in certain social climates and things like that, in particular in the white arena, so that some of the things that would normally separate us and make us seem uneducated or, again, all those things that I mentioned are not present. And so for us, for instance, so a good area would be the workforce, where, we might have conversations about certain things that are specifically cultural or a certain way I might talk. I might, be more animated in my reactions, or my body might talk or what have you, and stuff like that. And then when I come into an environment where I'm the minority, hi, nice to meet you. Again, in the example of the video, we might be talking like, "Oh, what you doing this weekend? That's nice. I'm so excited." And the response you might like, "Yes, I'm really looking forward to this weekend. It's going to be wonderful. Thank you for asking." And that's code switching.
I've seen the negativity of me not code switching, and the responses that I got, I was like, okay, that was not well received. Let me change it up just a little bit so I could be accepted. So to be completely honest with you, on a scale of 100% scale, I probably started off my job at maybe like I was 99% code switched, but now I'm on the other end of the spectrum. I'm full Troy now. I'm ethnically me, and I don't feel ashamed about it because I've grown, because now that I've been in my environment for so long, my work speaks for myself. And so I don't have to abide by anyone else's guidelines that they have anymore.
So I want you guys to go a little bit further with code switching, because I left our conversation with a new filter of what it's like to be a minority, having to constantly switch to the majority rather than naturally who I am. So I'd love for you to go there a little bit more with me of how does it affect you daily, day in and day out? Where do you see the negatives of it, and where do you see the growth in it too?
So I would say, first of all, welcome to our world, because it's exhausting. It's very exhausting. And the reason why a lot of people may not be aware of the fact that we do a lot of code switching is because we do it so effortlessly because we've been doing it for so long. And so someone may hear us say, "But Troy, you don't code switch or anything like that." To you, it doesn't seem like that because I've convinced you that I haven't been able to that this is Troy all the time. But it's exhausting. We get home, and that's when how when you get home after a long day of work and you take off your clothes and you feel relaxed, and then it's like when you get into the house, let me take this code switch off. It feels so good to be normal. But I will say, so the growth in learning that from a very early age, it's allowed me to adapt and go across different cultures. And so I can't always go into a culture and automatically assume that culture already knows who I am, my culture, my upbringing, and things of that nature. And so it makes me to want to be, hey, I'm a visitor here. Let me have my badge on, and I want to learn as much as I can so that I get comfortable around you, you get comfortable around me, and we can both be in each other's worlds without being offensive and without stepping over places that we're not supposed to step upon. Once again, I mentioned, and this is unique to me, it's not for everybody, I'm an evangelist. So I actually need to know different type of cultures and stuff of that nature, because if I know more about you, then it helps me to reach you.
Part of the issue too is it's a lot to think about in the morning. Like for myself, if I get up in the morning, I'm thinking about what I'm wearing. You know, does this look like too much? I'm a kind of person where I'm always dressed up, so I always look professional and nice, but I have to think about, does this look too ethnic? You know, like a couple of weeks ago, I actually wore an African printed outfit, which was just something I wore because it was Juneteenth, a day of celebration. And I was like, this is a perfect opportunity to wear this. But I had to think about that. It's going to be offensive to some. Are people going to understand it? It's going to look too loud. Like he said, when individuals know you one way and you come across another way, it can also make it very uncomfortable for people.
Throws them off.
And throws them off, exactly. And so, you know, I have to think before you even take a step, you're thinking about your approach. When you walk into a room, the first thing you do is you're sizing up the room and getting to know your environment. You're listening to people talking, I'm listening to people talking and seeing how the room speaks to understand what's comfortable, how much I can, you know, relax, or how much of the code switching I might have to do. And it's become such an automatic response that some of it just happens naturally. And so, like he said, I don't realize how tired I am until I get home at the end of the day, and I'm like,
and it's real. I didn't even realize until we were just now talking about it, but that's really real.
Let me ask this. So let me push on that thought process just a little bit. What would you say to the person that would say to you, you're judging me that I can't handle the real you, and you're imposing that on me? What would you say to that mindset?
A lot of the things that we're seeing and we're hearing about today, it's one thing if one person is saying, but when a whole culture speaks and says this is a commonality amongst all of us, it should have a place where you say, I want to understand it more. Maybe there's something to it. And so my reason for doing it, and I'm not trying to speak against anyone that I've had to do it, you know, in front of. It's not that anyone has forced me to, but when time and time again you see, like he said, the times when you don't do it and you see the negative response from it, it teaches you naturally to say, okay, I need to read my environment different. I can't do this in the next place.
Yeah, I appreciate your honest answer there. So let's finish with this. Let's finish, unless you guys have something else. Let's finish with, so going to Blue Ridge, as we're wading into this conversation, if you could say, as Blue Ridgers, who have been bought in for multiple years into Blue Ridge as a church, into what we do as a church, what would be your perspective as Black Blue Ridgers that you would love to see us do another step? You would love to see leadership take, me take? I mean, anything's on the table there.
I would say continue to be willing to have these uncomfortable conversations.
Okay.
That would be, I think this is a stepping point. We represent one minority, and obviously there are so many others that attend Blue Ridge. And with the predominant demographic being, you know, on one side, I'm not asking someone to make provisions just for us specifically, but to have understanding, to seek the knowledge, to try to be inclusive in that way, even outside of Blue Ridge. I hope that one of the conversations I had with someone already was, you know, it's easy to accept me because I'm your friend. You talk to me regularly. You know my story, that kind of thing. But there's potentially an unconscious bias that you might have that you don't realize because we're friendly. But how do you respond to other people who look like me who you don't know?
Yeah, one of the things that that I would say is to don't shy away. Just don't shy away. It's really easy to get into a rhythm of how we do things. And any cog that is thrown off in that whole process of that rhythm can make some people just go crazy. It's like, what is going on? Why are we changing things up? And in essence, I think sometimes we as believers, we get comfortable in the rhythm of things. Okay, so we're comfortable with having the conversations about the gospel. We're getting comfortable with talking about abortion. We get comfortable with talking about our sexuality. We get comfortable with all those things. But then when there's something that, a dark place that some of us haven't ventured into, and we may not be well versed in, or we may not have the experience of, or whatever the case may be, don't be afraid to press into it. The reason why is because in those unknown places, God is able to do some miraculous things. I think as I'm not just saying Blue Ridge, period. I'm talking about the church, the global church. Mm-hmm. We have our set messages when we want to talk about certain types of things, and we know how we're going to approach it. But some things are so sensitive that we have shied away from it because it's like, we don't normally do this, so we're not going to do that. We're not good at that. And look, if you can hear in that statement, we're dependent upon ourselves more so than dependent on asking God to give us the opportunity to get into these rough situations. Jesus himself did not shy away from rough situations. Mm-hmm. He crossed over so many cultures, classism, genderism. Like he crossed over all those different things, and he had no problem addressing those things in those specific moments. So why would we as a church be afraid to do the same thing?